Great. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you are. This is Mike, who's really based in an airplane seat flying around all the time, but my home is actually Hong Kong. I was in Singapore a few years ago, but now in Hong Kong. And what I want to talk to you about today is big consumer data, as you can see from the title, the promise, the overpromise, and the opportunity. And I'll talk about big data alone, and then at the end, bring it back to some applications for market researchers. The big story is that while I think there is a lot of potential for big data, there has been an incredible amount of overpromise, and there's more bad examples out there than there are good examples. And I'll then suggest that there's a couple of elements that we need in order to capture the opportunity and have more good examples than bad ones, and that talking about a consumer data mall, talking about roles in terms of translators, and also the need for not only Mathmen but Madmen, which I will explain later on. Okay, so you may have seen this cartoon from the 1990s when somebody said on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. And there's the updated version of that, which says, with big data, we know it's a dog, we know what kind of dog, and we know all sorts of things about it. And this is sort of the view of big data. And we've had several national security links and whatever that have talked about how much governments and all that know about you. And in fact, there is a tremendous amount of data out there. But the reality is it doesn't get used in a positive way for most people. So this is an example program called emails. It's one of many examples, but it's atypical. So in emails, you get what are supposed to be tailored offers. And I have two metrics I use. Is an offer relevant and is it personalized? And in this case, it's personalized, so different people get different offers. But as you can see, or maybe can't see depending upon the clarity of your screen, they're suggesting that the same person would like to subscribe to Car and Driver, GQ, and Cosmopolitan. And except for maybe media buyers, I can't imagine the overlap of people who want to read all three magazines at the same time. They are targeted to very different audiences. And so it's definitely poorly personalized. And yet this is despite the fact that every time you interact with emails, they ask you three questions afterwards. Now, the three questions are on different topics, and they're clearly designed to help them do better targeting. And people answer them, hoping to get back more relevant offers, but then you get things like what I just showed you. So the system isn't working despite the potential, because we'd like to get personalized. We'd like to be offered subscriptions to the magazines we might actually read without being spammed, which is how most people would describe it, by things that we are not interested in reading. Gartner is in on the overhype, or at least they were a couple of years ago. They have their hype curve, and they showed big data and the trough of disillusionment, which is the point where there's a lot of overpromise and not a lot of delivery. And if you talk to most CEOs or CMOs and said, you know, what's happening with big data, they'd say, if they were being totally honest, they've invested a lot of money, but they're not getting a lot of value out of it. Now, Gartner is, big data is political, so Gartner's actually taken big data off of their hype curve rather than, I think, acknowledge the fact that we're in the middle of that trough of disillusionment. And there is a lot of data out there. So I've worked in telecoms my last couple of jobs. And if you think about a mobile phone, you have all the billing data, you have the call data records, you have SMS. The telecom knows what apps you use, what URLs you go to, where you are, and there's all sorts of sensors. One of my favorite examples is someone showed how you can estimate, predict whether it's a male or a female holding a phone just by looking at the accelerometer data, because males and females hold their phones in different parts of their body, and you can sense that. And there's also a lot of non-network data that's on your phone that they could have access to if they gave it to you. So there's a lot of data out there. I don't think anybody disputes that. There is the fourth V of veracity. So you've got volume, variety, and velocity. Veracity can still be an issue, and it's one we as researchers would know well. But again, that's something that's being addressed. Hardware, not an issue anymore. When I started doing CRM, as it was called 20 years ago, hardware was a real issue. These days, it's not. You can put almost unlimited amount of data in the cloud for very low prices. Software, the same thing. This is just some of the examples, but you know, Hadoop got around software limitations of traditional data warehouses. There's lots of software out there. That's not the constraint. There is a constraint on talent. It's not solved. It's being addressed. There are more and more data science programs getting out there. And so there are people who are building the skill set. So this is not solved, but it's in the process of being solved. And there are examples of people who do this well. So this is a mailer from Tesco. This is an actual mailer. Tesco collects detailed information through their club card system, both about your demographics, your family size, where you live, and your behavioral patterns, which is what you've purchased at Tesco. And from that, they can predict what kinds of products you're most interested in. And when you get your quarterly mailer, so this is in an environment where most people are moving towards online marketing, Tesco still sends a quarterly mailer. You get your rebate, you get coupons, and those coupons are personalized. And unlike most programs, if you talk to Tesco customers, as I've done on a non-scientific basis, they will tell you they look forward to this mailer because when they open it up and look at the offers, it's going to be for things that are relevant. They have figured out what is relevant. Now, obviously, that's also combined with what manufacturer offers there are so that Tesco can economically offer these things. But they've done a very good job of engaging consumers with relevant offers. They're personalized. And although Tesco's had some economic problems recently, they would tell you that the club card program and this personalization program was responsible for them becoming the #1 retailer in the UK. So there are good examples. If we look at some of the more sophisticated stuff, I apologize, this keeps skipping. This is an example using location pattern. So when I was at Singtel, we worked a lot with location data. People tend to work with the single point information, which is messy and frankly less meaningful because of the messiness of figuring out, and also because once someone is where they are, it's harder to change their purchase patterns and to think about them in advance. We did work which looked from going from the here and now to the who by looking at patterns, and we were able to come up with different patterns based on location data over time, which led to the ability to deliver relevant customer customized and personalized offers. So this is an example where big data could augment, in this case a telco, but anybody with frequent location data to deliver relevant and personalized information, marketing messages. But there's more bad examples than there are good ones. So this is from Foursquare. Foursquare is a program where you check in, so there's no ambiguity about the location. And you can see here I've checked in, this is in Philadelphia in the US, I've checked into Chinatown, the Greyhound bus lines terminal. And this is where it's not only personalized but irrelevant, it's annoying. So they're trying to sell me gasoline. Now, I don't know about your country, but in the US, when you go and you get on a bus, you do not have to bring your own gas. You don't have to gas up the bus. So why they think that someone who has told them I'm at a bus station should be sold gas is just an example of misusing the data and annoying people. And if this was the only bad example, that would be fine, but it's not. So this is an email that many of you, if not most of you, probably got. Not this specific email, but an email like this, which is you go online and you book a flight or you book a hotel. And within a couple hours, and then repeating itself for months and months afterwards, and I'm not exaggerating, this particular email I would get once a week for almost 12 months saying, wouldn't I like to buy a ticket from New York to Barcelona, despite the fact that I live in Hong Kong. Now, I did, in fact, buy a ticket from New York to Barcelona. I was going to a ICOM conference, which is a global data marketer association, and I did buy this ticket. I also bought it immediately after doing the search, and yet for weeks afterwards, I got this data. I got this offer. And this, again, is personalized, but it's not relevant, and it's annoying. And more recently, last year, I gave a speech in Australia. And in booking my trip down to Sydney, I booked the autograph collection by Marriott. I'm a Marriott loyalist. I went and I booked the hotel. And I looked online, booked it, and within this case, about an hour, I started getting this message. And again, for weeks afterwards, I booked it maybe a couple months before I went down there. I was getting messages that said, why don't you book this hotel, even though I'd already booked it. What's interesting about this example is in the audience for the ADMA conference where I was speaking down in Australia was the team from Marriott, and after I put that up there and said this is an example, from the audience came this sort of, we're sorry, because they recognized that this is not what they wanted to deliver to consumers. Now, we understand why this happens. It happens because the actual booking data with Marriott is not shared with the engines that are placing ads onto websites. So we understand why it's happening, but from a consumer perspective, and that's my metric, which is from a consumer perspective, are we engaging people? Clearly failing. I won't play this now. It's technically difficult to do on the webinar, but if you go to this link and think of this as Spotify. So think of this as a product where you put your iPhone or whatever device in your pocket and you're just listening. And this is an exam where some people have not thought about the media they're picking, because if you listen to the ad, you won't understand it. It's clearly they've used what was video, and in video you would understand what's being marketed, but here you don't. So we've got an opportunity. We've got people like Tesco said, when you do it well, consumers respond well. We've got lots of bad examples, and if you have any particularly bad ones you want to share with me for use in future speeches, I'd be happy to. What do I see as three elements that will help ameliorate this situation? So the consumer data model, which I'll explain, integrators and translators with a role, and also Madmen and Mathmen. So let me talk briefly about each of the three. So the consumer data model. So what we've got is consumers who want service and not sales. And this is an important concept, which is when you deliver relevant and personalized offers, it stops being marketing. The marketing is okay, but the service is great. But what they mean by service is what we would call marketing or sales. And you've got, it comes up, marketers who need sales and they need effectiveness and efficiency. So the consumer data model sits between them. What is the consumer data model? It takes data. It's never shipped out. What is shipped out are scores. So if you had a particular marketing offer, it would tell you someone with a score of 95 is likely to respond to the offer, and it's been good for them, and someone who is 5 should not get the offer. What comes out of it? Offers that are relevant and personalized, either from the data model or sent from the marketers themselves if they're marketing to their own customers. So you deliver to consumers things that they respond to, and they then send you feedback in terms of both responses, but also in their evaluation of different offers. You know, similar to, as I showed you in emails, where they ask questions. And in fact, once you develop trust with consumers, you can add another dimension, which is the data model can directly ask questions to consumers and get answers. So you see in the yellow circle, what you have is a positive iterative circle. You have a dialogue, not a monologue, between marketers and consumers, and it's win-win. Consumers get more of what they want, marketers get more of what they want. Now, I could speak for a long time on this, happy to engage with anyone sort of separately within more depth on the consumer data model. The second issue is translators. So what you've got is end users and senior management who are not experts in using big data, nor is it their role to be. And you've got the data, IT, and data scientists, all of the experts out there who understand their craft quite well. As I said earlier, there's lots of tools and techniques, and there's more and more people who know how to do this. But the two don't know how to talk to one another. One group, for those of you who and get the joke, it's Greek to me, so the data scientist talking in Greek and senior management talking in Korean, and the two don't understand each other. So what we need is a role that sits in between. So translator, integrator, I'm looking for the right label for it, but the idea of this role is that you talk to end users, you understand their business problems, and you translate that into a data science request, which is not something data scientists should be skilled at. Right? They then do their data science, and they come up with output, which is often indecipherable to an end user. And again, the translator or the integrator says, here's the answer to the business problem you've solved. Here's what you should do. Here's some data to support that, but you don't overwhelm them with output, which is what tends to happen now. So we need this group that can sit in between and can help capture the potential of data scientists, because it's not enough to have a consumer data model or an aggregate of data. You need people who can apply the appropriate techniques and tools to that data to solve real business problems. Again, can talk more about this at length. Last thing, you need Mathmen. That's what the data scientists are. But you also need Madmen, because the issue here is that if I have a wonderful targeting of a method, if I have my scores, I know exactly what should go to who, but I only have one offer, then I don't need to do targeting. Particularly in an environment where I can deliver offers for virtually no cost. There's no need to be more efficient. The art is saying who should get offer 1, and if they don't get offer 1, who gets offer 2? And if they're not appropriate for offer 1 and 2, they should get offer 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You go out to ultimately dozens of offers. And for that, you need madmen. Madmen not who are used to doing mass marketing, but madmen who understand how to create not just different flavors of the same offer, but substantially different offers so that you can, in fact, get people to respond in something that they want to respond to. Again, long to talk more about this, but I see this as a third requirement. So in order to capture the opportunity, we need consumer data model or something which helps aggregate behavioral data, so beyond the search data, which is what Google and Facebook work on. We need integrators who can deal with business users and connect it to the data, and then we need madmen who can take that data and attach it to appropriate offers. So that, I think, would do a lot in pushing forward the opportunity of big data. Easier said than done, but again, time for a different discussion. Let me, in my last minute or two, just turn to market researchers' use of big data. So this is from Millward Brown Digital. You'll see that in 2015, people were very nervous about big data. Only 14% thought they had confidence in their organization to use it. It's now up to 41%, that being highest in, lowest in brands and highest in agencies. I think this is over-optimism. I think the 14% is actually closer and hasn't gone that much further, that people don't understand what they don't understand, and that, in fact, we're not using big data well. So, two thoughts about how we address that. One, to researchers, please stop asking people what they did. They don't remember accurately, right? If you want to understand their behaviors, append their actual usage data into your research. Don't ask them how many flights you've been on, how many were business class, how many were economy, how many were long haul, how many were short haul. People will answer the question, and in fact, I'm currently working on an effort where we'll document how inaccurate people's memory is. In aggregate, it may be okay, but at an individual level, it's actually quite poor. And big data allows us to pull in the big data so that we actually don't have to ask people things that we should know the answer to anyway. Conversely, to the data scientists, stop assuming that the data is all you need, that you don't need to talk to people. And you have to ask people why. And a good example of this is there's a community for people who fly United Airlines that I participate in, and they publicize some research done by Harvard University about what's called leisure travel. Business and leisure. And they said they understood the extent of leisure travel because they looked at their big data and they said how many trips start on a weekday and end on a weekend, or start on a weekend and end on a weekday. The assumption being that if you were traveling weekend and weekday, it was a combination of business and personal, versus if it was business, it would be all weekday, and if it was leisure, it would be all weekend. Now, that's a not unreasonable assumption, but in the world of big data, you can connect the data to your users and ask them actually, in fact, how much leisure travel there was, and was there an occurrence where you were traveling on Saturday because the business meeting ended on Friday night and you couldn't get the flight home, or you actually added a day on Wednesday to go do some sightseeing. And it was an example of big data assuming that all you needed was the data rather than engagement with customers. And I found that particularly interesting because it was publicized on a community site where, in fact, they had the relationship and they could have asked people. So from researchers, stop asking people what they do, but say to the data scientists, start asking people more why questions and connect that to your data. And with that, that is the end of my session. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Mike. So, Mike, a couple of comments of people loving the Mathmen and Madmen idea. So that's good. Luca asks, do you expect an increase of consumer privacy violation concerns in the upcoming future due to more personal data being shared or not?
So the answer is yes and no. I expect that consumers will get more and more resistant to being spammed, to getting things like the emails offer I showed you. On the other hand, my experience is that when you actually deliver relevant, personalized messages, concerns about privacy disappear for all but 1 or 2% of people who are just very concerned about the issue. So to me, the issue is not privacy, the issue is relevance. And what people are rebelling against is the lack of relevance, not the need for privacy. And if I had more time, I'd give more anecdotes on that. But every time we've said to people, if you give us this data and you get something back that you want, are you concerned about it? The answer is no. On the other hand, if you say, if we give data and you get back spam, they go, I don't want it, and then they invoke privacy.
Thanks, Mike. Another one, and you may have already covered this, but just in case there's any other extra bits you'd like to add, why do we see so many bad examples of targeting with big data? Now, I think you've sort of answered some of that with your consumer mall example and pointing out that things aren't linked. Are there any other reasons that you perhaps haven't touched on today?
Well, my answer is 3 points. One is exactly what you just said, which is it's the lack of integrating behavioral data in with the search data. So Google and Facebook sell you one search. So that clearly is 1 point. But the second point is the lack of integrators, and the third point is the lack of Madmen. So just having the data alone isn't any good unless you've got the translators that get it used actionably, and then the Mathmen who can then create the offers or the communications that leverage it. So I think all three are responsible.
And Mike, what do you think the time frame for these things getting better? Are we still going to be getting bad emails in like 2 years' time, 10 years' time? How close are we to solutions for most companies?
So I'm a pessimist in this regard. I think the solution is clear, but I've been doing CRM work with customer data since the late 1980s. And if you'd asked me in 1992, I wrote an article for the McKinsey Quarterly with a bunch of other people then about the future. And if you'd asked us then, would we be in 2017 where we are, we'd say absolutely not. We will have proceeded much further than that. So although we know what to do, and we knew a lot more what to do back then than we ever used, it doesn't happen. There's incredible organizational inertia and factors I haven't gotten into. So I think we'll be talking about this in 5 and 10 years. I think there will be a growing gap between people who figure it out and do a better job of it. So I don't think it will be all bad. I think that there'll be more good examples, but I think we'll continue to have bad examples going out for 5 and 10 years.
And do you think the companies that get it right will see, be rewarded for that in terms of, customer satisfaction, customer loyalty, etc.?
Oh, absolutely. The people who I define getting it right, not just delivering relevant personalized offers, but then getting commercial value out of it. And so again, Tesco would tell you that they became the #1 grocer. They were #2 before they introduced Club Card, and they built several share points, and they would say it was due to Club Card. The people who do this will tell you that it leads to commercial success, but it's not a linear function. It's not you get a little bit better and you get a little bit more loyalty. It's actually more of a step change, because when your communications stop being marketing and start being service, people not only will respond to them, but they'll pay more attention to them. So you get a double bonus. So what you see is that it's a very steep learning curve to capture the value. But once you do and you get it right, then the returns are exponentially better than what you had previously.
Fantastic. Mike, we do have another comment that sort of takes us back to privacy, which is a good point, particularly in this APAC session. Obviously, different countries and around APAC have different privacy rules. Is that causing problems for companies operating in the region, or is there a good sort of blanket approach?
Well, it does cause problems because there are different loyalty or privacy regimes across the region, and then anybody who's dealing with Europe or Australia, which have very similar and much tighter controls over privacy. However, if you get consumer permission, then just about anything can be shared. So what the data privacy regimes and laws do is stop you from using data without the acknowledgement of the consumer. If the consumer says, I'm all in for this, please, then there are no restrictions, except in Australia where you cannot send out the actual phone numbers. But other than that, consumer permission, which I believe is part of the consumer data model. It's not just doing this behind people's backs, it's doing them, telling them what you're doing and why you're doing it, and engaging them with it. So to me, the solution will avoid the problem of privacy law by getting explicit consumer permission, and by explicit, I don't mean hiding it under a 20-page T&C that you click without reading, but telling people. And again, my belief is, and the experience has showed, when you tell people what you're doing and you give them some positive reinforcement, they get stuff they like, they don't mind sharing the data.
Okay, thanks very much, Mike. That's all of our questions for this session. So thanks very much for coming along and sharing your expertise in the area.
Thank you very much.